folks. Welcome to an all-new So Bad It's Good with Ryan Bailey. This is your pal Ryan. This is presented by Betches Media, and today we have a fantastic guest for you. I am so excited. I've been excited to talk to her for a minute now. She has a fairly new podcast that I think you're going to be obsessed with. Now, the great thing about this show is that I can actually now I can put you in the path of really great things to listen to and watch. And I think I'm doing this today because I have listened to a bunch of her episodes and I just think they're fantastic. With my show, you know, sometimes it's primarily, whether you believe it or not, a comedy podcast. And we sometimes will stumble upon something that has meaning or something that I derive meaning from it. But this person actually, she does this as work. She has a basis of knowledge to actually be able to give educated observations about behavior that we see with these reality show characters. And through that, we get a fuller picture of these shows that we love so much and these characters that we sometimes get so frustrated with. But what I love about her is that she reminds us that there's behavior at play that can help us to empathize with these characters, that give us a roadmap to see why we're seeing the behavior that we're seeing. Now, most recently, she posted something about Kyle Richards from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And if you listen to this show, I kept saying from the beginning, we're missing a huge piece. We are missing a huge piece with Kyle Richards that I don't think people are picking up on. And she did a post that I think was just so brilliant. And it kind of had, like, it went crazy. It went a little viral in terms of the Bravo audience. And I think rightfully so. But I hope that got more people to her podcast, and I hope today gets more people to her podcast. We're going to talk about everything. So her podcast is, write this down, Your BISH Therapist. And that's not BITCH, that's BISH. And what do we do if anybody is kind enough to come on this show? We subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we rate it 5 stars, because I think what she'll tell you, as well as I'll tell you, is that a lot of work goes into these things. Listen, you could make the argument that I am crazy for doing this in the first place, but since I agree with you, you always want to give 5 stars just to satiate my ego and anybody else's ego and for the hard work and time they put into this. So this is one of the longer intros I've done in a while, but I'm so excited to have her on. So ladies and gentlemen, Melissa Reich. Melissa, how are you? Reich,
Hi.
Melissa Reich. Did
No,
I do
no,
it?
no.
I screwed up. Melissa
It's okay.
Reich. Melissa,
It's
wait,
Reich.
which is it, Melissa?
It's Reich.
Oh my
It's
God.
Reich.
I told her beforehand I was going to screw up her last name. And what did I do? I screwed up your last name. That's how, what is that behavior, Melissa? Tell me what's wrong with me.
Listen, it's called anxiety because when I record my podcast, Ryan, I swear to you, I ask my audience, I've said the same thing. I will practice a name to the point where it's obsessive compulsive. And then I will get on, I will record, and it'll fly out of my brain. And I'm like, oh God. So you are in great company, my friend.
Oh,
And
Melissa,
thank you so much.
I have to put my name in the title of the podcast just because if not, I'll probably forget it. I'm like, So Bad It's Good with Ryan Bailey? ? So Melissa, just explain to the audience, for those who don't know you, and for those who aren't chronically online, and congrats to all those who aren't chronically online.
Yeah.
What do you specialize in? You know, because there's a lot of letters that go after your name. What do they mean? Explain to me your background. What's your background?
Sure. So my background is I have a bachelor's in psychology from Penn State University. And then I went to graduate school and I have a master's degree in clinical psychology from LaSalle University. And then after about 3,000 hours of actual work in the field and multiple internships, and it took forever, I now have an LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor. So in the state in which I live, I have my license. I couldn't practice in California. And it sounds like I probably wouldn't want to. Therapy in LA sounds wild.
Oh, Melissa, you don't even understand. I have a therapy appointment right after this today. And I've had therapists in the past, and now I have a couple of different therapists, which we won't get into. But over the last period of time, I've been trying to find the right one. And it is one of the most difficult tasks, you know, because you go through your insurance company, if you're lucky to have insurance, and they sent me like a 147-page document of everybody, I think, in Los Angeles. And then you're going through all of these names, and you're like, I don't even know, you know, like some of these have websites, some of them don't. And you're like, I don't even know if these are good or not. And it is such such a scary process to find
Yeah.
somebody. They
Yeah.
make it so hard to actually
Mhm.
get help sometimes.
That's right. And so part of why I started this is because I want therapy to be accessible to people. And so it's not that I do therapy, but I share a lot of wisdom, from my work. I've been, in the field for about 23 years now. And to your point, it's so frustrating, number one. And number two, I believe what truly makes therapy magic is the connection between the therapist
Yeah.
and the client, truly.
That yeah.
I know. And so it's so frustrating because it's like you work yourself up to get the courage to go, and then you go and you're like, I don't know if this is a great fit. And it just feels so defeating. So here's what I'm going to
Yes.
suggest
Yes.
to everybody listening. Psychologytoday.com. It's like Tinder for therapists. I mean, not quite Tinder, but you get the point.
Yeah, let's walk that back a little bit. It's really
Right.
just mainly finding a therapist. Yeah.
Right. But it's nice because so all the therapists on there have to be verified. They have to have profiles and pictures, and it says what insurances they take. And so you can really search, right? If you're looking for a certain male or female, if you're looking for non-binary, if you're looking for someone who takes a certain insurance, if you're looking for specialties. So for example, I specialize in dealing with anxiety, depression, and chronic illness. Those are my specialties, but they will list all of their specialties, and then that can help you kind of narrow it down, because I feel like
Oh,
people are good at vibes, like you might be
yeah.
able to look at a picture and get a vibe. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I recommend.
Well, I mean, and I've been on Psychology Today a lot, actually. And what I think is so cool about that in particular, they also let the therapist say a mission statement of,
Yes.
through the work that we do together, we can do this, 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 and this is a little
Mhm.
bit of how I approach the work. And that's what you don't get from insurance documents. You just get a
Right.
name, you get a location, you get basic, and that's, your insurance will cover. But Psychology Today has been a great resource. But you're right about the vibes. Like, I was talking to certain people just on a call, and I was like, I don't like your voice. I mean, I didn't say that out loud, but I
Sure,
was like,
sure.
but
Yeah.
how petty, but it's such a crapshoot with therapy, because you're really banking on, you're already in a tender spot. You're already in a
Mhm.
place of, I don't know why my mind works the way it does. And
Mhm.
then you're having to also then be a secretary for yourself on top of that. And my mom always said, you
Mhm.
have to be your best advocate, and
Oh.
that you have to be your best health advocate. And she really, in the last couple of years especially, drilled that into me of like, you and my mom made it a full-time job to, and she had about 10 different doctors near the end, and each one of
Mhm.
those, and I just thought, how crazy is the medical system, that even these doctors, they weren't communicating with each other. So my mom, communicating together effectively, and
Yeah.
my mom would have to catch that. And I was
Mhm.
like, she's not a doctor. She's not a, and I just found it wild.
It is wild, and I'm so grateful you said that because, your mom, and I know she's passed, and my condolences,
What?
because
Melissa, what? What do you,
she's
wait, no, don't tell me that. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
no, she just sounded like an amazing woman. But I really always say that is that you do have to be your own best advocate. Nobody is going to do it for you, whether it's physical health or mental health. Which, by the way, they're one thing. Like, they're not separate things. People like to think that they're separate,
Yeah.
but they really are not. Because I also have a lot of chronic health issues. And so I fully understand where your mom was coming from with, it's like, I'm an administrative assistant with all of my mental and physical health issues. And it really is a full-time job. It's so hard.
Yeah, I was listening to your episodes, and you brought up that your chronic illness, and that you
Hmm.
were taking a little bit of a break from your podcast. And I want to remind people, you can listen to all these episodes. You can just fully binge all of these in the past, and you'll catch up on all of this season of a lot of the Bravo shows. But she's returning back in the middle of January, and I believe she's going to start off with Paris and Love season 2. Which, if
Hmm.
you listen to my Patreon episode on Paris and Love season 2, or even this podcast, I found it so psychologically tantalizing because of the Kathy Hilton of it all, and to really understand a little bit more of why Paris Hilton the way she is. And then
Hmm.
also, it ties so much into Kyle Richards and things that you've been talking about, Kyle, in regards to Beverly Hills. But my question to you, in terms of your, why Melissa, why do this? Because when you put yourself in a position of you're already helping people, but you're then throwing yourself into a Bravo audience that is rabid, we really pick apart every moment. And not all of that is good. We have a path of destruction, I think, a lot when it comes to these Bravo celebrities, myself included, that I think then we pick up those tendencies and we throw them into our everyday lives. Why put yourself in this driver's seat of doing something that is fascinating, helpful, entertaining to listen to, and I learned something, but why put through your own emotional health through that?
That is such a good question. I ask myself that literally every day. Like, why did I do this? Why? So the short answer is that I got my start actually from Amy Phillips, who says hi, by the
I
way.
love
She
Amy
adores
so
you.
she is the guys. I heard if you ever get to see her do her one woman show, I mean, it is. She is so damn talented, and and I know she's already super successful, but I was watching a movie last night and I was like, Amy Phillips should be in this movie. Amy Phillips should be like, she's just so talented. But again, Amy kind of discovered you. Is that how it worked?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, the long story short, and by the way, you're right, Amy is truly the nicest, kindest, most loving, authentically amazing humans, which you and I both know you don't find that in this business. In fact, usually quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Ugh, woof. I could tell some stories, but Amy essentially, so back when she was on SiriusXM doing Reality Check, she had announced that she was going to do her podcast, Drama Darling, which, by the way, everyone should subscribe to that. She is amazing.
An amazing Patreon too, you guys. She puts like a lot of stuff over in the Patreon, and also she's really nice. But I don't want to leave out she's wickedly funny. It's not like she's wickedly funny. Yeah.
Wickedly funny. Like, I'll text her, which it's like, real. I'm texting Amy Phillips, whose life is this? And she will just say some of the most, she'll just like drop wisdom, humor. And I'm like, you are the most amazing person. But so she had asked a question on Reality Checked about a psychotropic medication. And of course, being a therapist, I had the answer to that. And so I DM'd her, and you know how Amy used to call herself your bitch wife?
Yeah.
You know, that was her thing because of the whole Joe Judice or Judy, whatever. And when I DM'd her, I actually, believe it or not, my podcast is pretty serious, but I do have a wickedly dark sense of humor, and I am actually pretty funny. You wouldn't really know it on my podcast, but
no. Wait, guys, I do want to say it's like you're talking to the smartest one of your friends, but I mean, like, it's not, no, I'm saying it's not that you're not funny. You're talking about a very serious topic, but you're talking about it in a we can get through this kind of way, and there's a lightness to it. There is lightness to it. It's not, but you're not making like hard punchline jokes.
No. Which I feel like is a missed opportunity because I am actually very funny. But so when I had messaged Amy, I said, you could just call me your bitch therapist. And so she was like, that is hilarious. And so then when she went over to her Patreon, she had me on her show. This wasn't born yet. I just had like a private Instagram page with like 200 followers. I'm not huge on social media. And she had me on her show, and people went insane. They were like, who is this? We want more. It just like, I realized, to answer your question, I realized that it was a niche that I just was good at because I've been watching these Bravo shows for decades. And I am doing like what I do on my Instagram and what I share on my podcast. It was all happening up here in my brain. And so I was just like, wait, people want to hear this? That's so weird to me. And then, your bitch therapist was born. And the reason it's not bitch therapist is because Instagram doesn't take too kindly to like a curse in your username. Yeah. And I didn't want to be shadow banned and all of that. So then that's how the BISH came.
Yeah. I think what I love about your podcast, and I would actually kind of relate it in a different way to like the Bravo docket ladies, when there's a specialized, there's a specialized intelligence on a certain topic that I don't have or the listeners don't have. It's really great to have a helping hand of somebody like, okay, this is a reliable narrator. This is somebody taking us through and actually giving some terms to the behavior that we're seeing. And the Bravo docket does that from a legal sense. And I think that's why they're successful as well, because it gives just a little more information. And I think, you were saying in one of your podcasts is that we will never stop learning. We learn until the day we die. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is something that I pride myself on, is that I want to consume as much information and knowledge as
Mm-hmm.
I can. It's the only thing that I think I'm good at is I want to consume information.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so fascinating about your podcast and certain others that have that kind of emotional intelligence. Now, you did say you wanted to give a disclaimer before we start getting into these shows. What is
Yes.
that disclaimer for the
So
audience?
the disclaimer, mine is long. I'm not going to do that whole long thing on here because your listeners, they'll get bored and fall asleep.
No, but believe me, I've put them to sleep much earlier than this. It's good.
Okay. So my disclaimer is just that post, and everything that I'm talking about today is not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide any medical advice. Your BISH therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. I don't know these people. They're not my clients. I am using my clinical knowledge and experience, plus my intuition and personality, to give theories on what I think is going on. So I just want to be super clear about that, because people love to come for me. Love professionals, by the way. Love it.
Well, no, I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, but it turns out when you put yourself out there, a lot more people want to really throw in their 2 cents. And I do think there's a negative bent a lot in terms of people wanting to have a voice. And I think that is something where reality shows have put in a lot of these personalities at the forefront, is our constant desire to be real people, but then to also be something much more than we are, to have
Mm-hmm.
fame, to have, I was even
Mm-hmm.
thinking about that when listening to your Southern Charm episode of, you have Austin and his behavior and him going to see a therapist this season, which I always, like you, am shocked when they film these things that are very personal. And I always wonder what's going through the therapist's head that actually made them sign the paper, what actually
Oh
is
yeah,
going through, because I feel like that almost is pushing against the help that it actually gives.
that's right.
And, so, but I think the constant quest for fame, and we see this a lot with the Vanderpump Rules cast as well, is that you see how it's deteriorated them as overall people. Is that like, who would want to
Mm-hmm.
be in the Vanderpump Rules friend group at this point when you see the history? Yet people still want to, because
Right.
they love this magic shiny box that they've watched all their life and
Mm-hmm.
the possibility of being around it. But what do you think overall, from your view, that this does to people? Because you're dealing with some intense issues, especially Kyle on the season of Beverly Hills. I thought, like, I said, man, maybe Kyle should have sat this one out because there's so much happening. How do
Mm-hmm.
you view it, and how do you view it through fame as that prism to view it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think, here's the thing for me, the big downside of what I'm doing is I don't want to be famous. It's like, as my Instagram grows, I am nervous, honey. I
Yeah,
am
right.
like, oh God, this is scary.
Yeah, right.
Because I think that fame monster, it's like, I was reading some sort of article about how on social media, like if you have over 10,000 followers, like it can't help but infiltrate your brain a little bit, right? Because
Oh,
we're hearing these things about us. Like people are telling me on a daily basis that I'm the most amazing person. And I'm like, well, that's great that you think so, but I assure you I am not.
oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They're like, oh, you're all big time now. And I'm like, oh my God, really? Like, you do
Yeah.
not know what it's like to be in my mind. And, that's why I don't open the majority of my DMs anymore, because I'm scared to know, I'm scared to see them. Like every time I
Yeah.
open that app, which I still open that app constantly because it's an addiction like anything else, but it's
Hmm.
scary. And that's like, I have no desire to ever be on reality television, yet like you, it was something that I have been watching since I was young. I've been obsessed with these, just like you have been watching these characters on TV. Oh, did I freeze on you?
You did a little
Okay.
bit,
Okay.
but I'm
Okay.
back.
Okay.
Um, you're back. So yeah, I think that, with Kyle and with some of these other folks who, you and I and a lot of people are like, why don't they sit this one out? I think for me, there is the benefit of you being on these shows and getting to use your voice. Now, the immediate downside of that is people will weaponize your voice and turn it into, oh, well, you're lying, or you're just saying this because right. So there's a double-edged sword to that whole using your voice on social media and just like, on TV and things like that. But I think that these are all folks who want their voice to be heard. And of course, some of it, especially I think with the Vanderpump Rules cast, is like, fame feels great. People knowing who you are, right? Like people telling you you're great. And it feeds something in us that I look at humans as all like little children. Like we all have inner children that are not, that maybe were not heard or maybe didn't get to deal with some of those inner child issues. And so it's like, that's why I can be empathetic to a lot of people, because I just view someone even like Kyle Richards as like this little kid who just never had her voice and she was never able to be who she was. And like now she can. So
Oh,
yeah.
it's so fascinating. If you look into the Hilton family, the Richards family, Big Kath, Kyle and Kim and Kathy's mom, it's such a rich, interest, like I believe there will be a docuseries on that whole family one day if there's not already one in the works. But can you take us through what you wrote on that Instagram post and story that got passed around in regards to Kyle this season?
Sure. And trust me, no one was more surprised than me, because when Kyle reposted it, I thought it was like, how there's those fake accounts that they pretend like to be,
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wow, Elon Musk is following me. That's so wild. So when she reposted it, I thought I was going to have a heart attack and die. I was so shocked. So essentially what I said was that I thought that Kyle was experiencing symptoms of depression. And like she's made no bones about the fact that she's struggled with anxiety for a lot of her life. You can tell she's a classic overthinker. She likes to control things, and that always comes from a place of anxiety. But essentially what I said is that I think after the suicide of her friend Laureen, she just completely her whole world exploded, and everything that she thought that she knew, she didn't. And so essentially what I was saying is that it kind of sent her on the spiral. And then it sounded like Mo wasn't totally able to be present for her, because I think Mauricio is he's a little emotionally shallow, I feel.
What? Love Bean. No, Love Bean. No. Love Bean. You've got it all wrong, Love Bean. No.
And it's so sad because I think there is so much real love there.
Yes.
But
Yes. 27-year marriage, multiple kids, successful businesses, for all intents and purposes, and also in Beverly Hills. No matter if it never gets back on track, which I don't think it will, that is a very successful marriage that I think they will continue to be friends and business partners for the rest of their days.
I think so too. And I think to me, it's part of when a partnership breaks up, it's like that tells you a lot about the partnership. Was there respect, was there mutual love? And I think between them, even though Mauricio is kind of living his best life right now, whatever that means for him.
Is that your best life? By the way, snow skiing with Anita and a YouTuber in Aspen, wearing the biggest kemosabe hats you can have. Like that's good on the Instagram. But at the end of the night, you have to go to the bed usually by yourself and face yourself. And maybe that's his journey right now. Who knows where he'll go from here?
I agree. And I think that, for the people who are saying that this is fake, I mean, it's so absurd. Kyle and Mauricio, you could tell they genuinely have love. They grew up together, and I think for me too, I kind of understand their union because so my husband and I have been together since I was 20. Ew. And I'm 40. I'm going to be 43. So we've been together for 21 years, married for 15. I know,
gross.
So gross.
Stop. Oh my God. But I imagine you have gone through a full life in these 20 plus years that has had ups, has had downs, has had victories, losses. That's what life and relationships are, right?
Right. And I feel, especially in LA, people don't understand the work and the blood, sweat, and tears it takes to truly maintain a union, a multiple decades union. It's good, it's bad, it's ugly, it's messy, it's he's seen me at my worst, he's seen me at my best. So, and the thing is that he and I, just like Kyle and Mo, we grew up together. That's that's
Yeah.
that's the fact of the matter. When you are with someone since you're so young, you really do. You grow and you change, and who we are now is totally different than who we were then. But you either grow apart or you grow together. And I think that Kyle and Mauricio, I think that Kyle, and she confirmed that this was true, which is mind blowing to me. Is just that she spent her entire life trying to be a good daughter to Big Kathy, trying to be a good sister to Kathy and Kim, trying to be the responsible one, trying to be the quote unquote good one. And I think after Lorene died, she realized what's even real anymore. You can do everything right. Your life can still fall apart. And I think she realized that, especially now that her kids are mostly grown, except for Portia, she's still, in the home. But I think she just realized all of this control, all these things I was trying to do is for naught, and sometimes life's anyway. So let me figure out who the heck I am and for the first time live for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, and it's so interesting. There's so many fascinating things about this to me because everything that you said, I 100% agree with. But in regards to filming the actual show, what the show was presenting on the first half of the season, I thought was very disingenuous because all of these friends or these quote unquote friends that are, they're not in Kyle's day to day life. They're not in Kyle's day to day life. So they're all going, Sutton's like, well, where'd you get that ring, Kyle? I say, I don't even know. I don't believe you. And Erica's like, yeah, Kyle. It's so weird. And then they were, Kyle wasn't saying, listen, my best friend unalived herself. And I have been thrown into a spiral on top of the end of the reunion. I'm scared to death of my sister. I live in fear through childhood trauma. My husband, has potentially done things outside of the marriage and has for a long time. And even if we've had an understanding, I now feel differently about it. I'm on a show where everybody says I stole my sister's goddamn house. I've been on this show for 13 seasons and people say I haven't accepted responsibility for anything. Like all of these reasons. And then finally we had this very brave scene that I was so happy they put in with the therapist / life coach that thankfully this wasn't a new one. This is somebody that Kyle has been working with, where I'm like, this is it. This is one of the parts of the thesis statement of where we're at, because having somebody lose their life that is the closest person to you does make you take stock in things so much differently. And so that adds up to cutting alcohol out of your life, working out, seeing therapists, getting a new friend that has no deeper understanding of your life from conception to now, a new friend that doesn't know any of the bullshit that everybody else does. All of it to me clicked. Did it click for you?
1,000%, 1,000%. And in fact, when Kyle reposted what I said, she said, you'll see this soon. And I guess that's what she was referring to.
That was the next week. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the next week. Now, why she didn't say it like at that dinner where they're just, by the way, I love your Sutton and Erica impressions. They're so funny.
So by the way, yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's like people are half and half. People love it, and then people are like, "How dare you? How dare you?"
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, they both ask for it, but I think that sometimes, in my experience, when you have something that has literally broken your heart, it's such a vulnerable thing. And so if people are yelling at you and saying you're in denial and what about the ring, one thing I actually post on my Instagram is I actually said I think the women were getting in their own way of getting the answers, and here's why. She was saying, yes, things aren't good, but they're focusing on the wrong stuff. They're focusing on the ring.
On jewelry. They're
Yeah,
focusing on baubles and like the bullshit that Garcelle went through, the bullshit that Sutton went through, the
that's
bullshit
right.
Erica went through. And if you're going to compare Erica's marriage to Kyle's marriage, I have I'll sell you some property over in Bakersfield or something, because it is like, you can't compare those things. They are all
No.
men. We have all done wrong, but you can't compare them.
Exactly. It's like comparing apples and oranges, and it's an argument. I actually posted about this on Instagram. I call it whataboutism, where it's like, when I posted about what Kyle was going through, people would go, "Well, what about how she treated LVP?" And it's like, that's not a proper
That,
argument. That's
oh my God.
whataboutism
That's my
at its
biggest bone to
finest.
pick with
Yeah.
Bravo fans, is that
Yeah.
even in this, I went on the old Twitter or the Twitter or the X or whatever afterwards, and it's like, well, that doesn't make up for Kyle being a bitch the last. I'm like, guys, at some point you're going to have, like Erica Jane, you're going to have to learn what the word empathy means. And
Right.
it is all right to change feelings. It's all right to be passionate about something that somebody did something wrong, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also all right to realize somebody's going through a hard time, and you're going to be going through a hard time one day, dear
Right.
listener or viewer, whether you know it or not, and you probably already gone through it. And just remember that life is long and you go through a lot of things. Nobody gets out of this first alive, and nobody
Right.
gets out of this without really messing up certain things in life.
Absolutely. And, if we're doing this thing called life right, we grow and we change. And I think that Kyle was a different person. It was different circumstances, separated by a different time space continuum. And I just think it's kind of ridiculous to focus on those things. But back to the point, which is that it distracts people from, like, if Sutton would have asked the question, for example, I know you've said that things aren't good. Let's talk about that. I'm concerned.
Does that sound
Like,
like Sutton? Does that sound like something somebody like, name them, name all the problems you got, Kyle, name them.
right? Can I tell you the name 'em? So as someone who I value communication, like, communication is so special to me. When she kept saying that, I'm like, she's lucky Kyle didn't slap her. I would have been so
Oh,
irritated. So
Melissa,
irritated.
That's what I said. I said it was almost like she was daring Kyle to physically do something to her. She was,
Yeah.
and I feel like Sutton, in her, what is this, her fourth season, has finally like drank her own juice, Shelby, and is like, I'm going to
Mhm.
throw it all out there. I don't care what you say. I was like, like, she's
Mhm.
really trying to get a reaction. And I got to say, I enjoy it as a viewer, but I do sometimes not agree with the attack she's taking. But I also have to remember, this is a reality show that is entertainment based at the end of the day, even though we do learn things from it. But Melissa, what do you think about that in terms of, we don't get the full picture from these shows? And now, with the benefit of social media, or not benefit of social media, we are now all armchair therapists saying that we have a 360 degree of this person's life. And I'm going to say how they should handle this, how they should feel. How do you view that as a professional?
I just think that social media is a carefully curated facade, and we choose to show what we want. And usually people choose their best moments. So I think that we cannot possibly truly know a person just from watching them on TV, number one, because also the amount of time they film in terms of that person's life, it's so minuscule. And then on social media, you do get a little bit more, but again, it's so carefully curated. And I think a lot of these housewives now, because Housewives has turned into something wholly different from when we watched, season 1 of OC or season 1 of New Jersey.
Yeah, it's totally different.
It's totally different, is that these housewives are curating their fame. So my thought as a therapist is, you can't really go by the what you're seeing and what you're hearing. What I have that most people don't is just the awareness. Like, I can look at this behavior, and I'm used to people lying to me in therapy, and that happens. It's what people do. So you develop an intuition and a greater understanding of what's behind the facade. So that's why I think people enjoy what I do, because it's usually pretty on target, but I'm not going by what I'm seeing. I'm going by what I'm feeling and understanding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're also an empath as well. I mean, you
Oh,
also
I am.
feel things from a very different place, which I always find fascinating. That's another thing, just like armchair therapists, everybody now diagnoses themselves as an
Oh,
empath. Oh, I'm an empath. Oh, I'm an empath. Everybody's an empath. And I'm like, there's a difference. And the other thing, the bone to pick, is everybody's calling themselves a creator now. And I'm like, no, you just like to gossip online. That's not a creator. It's a difference. Like,
right.
would you
Right.
say Kyle's there's essentially maybe a sliding doors moment with Kyle that happened at last year's reunion? Because that keeps getting
Yes.
brought up in terms of Kyle that as a really banner moment for Kyle, even though when I watched it at the time, I wasn't sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, this is gonna break Kyle." I was really focused on Rinna and Kathy of it all. Wasn't really thinking about Kyle because she is that person that's always there. But that to me is a sliding doors moment of, that and her friend seems to have pushed her in this whole different life that
Hmm.
she had previously. And I found it fascinating. Like, what if that reunion had gone differently? What
Hmm.
if, like, I'd be so curious what Kyle's life would look like now and how far she would have kept going before she had an actual breakdown.
Yeah, that's such an astute observation and a great point is that, well, I can definitely tell that after last reunion, the reason why Kyle's pulling away from Dorit is because Dorit did not have her back. Dorit loves to talk a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And then,
Kyle, I am Dorit. I know exactly everything. Yeah, yeah, she
yeah,
loves it.
she loves it. And then, like, I do think people are scared of Kathy. And I think that
Rightfully so. Rightfully,
oh,
she will. By the way,
yeah.
Paris in Love season 2, which she's going to do an episode on, you guys. I walked away from that fearing Kathy. I
Oh,
went
yeah.
back and I was like, oh my God, I got to check out my memes that I've done on Kathy. Like, I met Kathy at BravoCon a couple years ago, and I swear to God, she knew who I had this feeling that she knew who I was, and she didn't like me. Like, she was like,
Huh.
yes, yes. Cause I was like, I'm so bad it's good with her. She's like, yes, yes, I know. And that, by the way, that could have gone like she just says that to everybody, or I do know and stop talking shit, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Kathy is that she does not like to be have anyone say anything sideways about her. Like she does not like to be accountable for anything she does. And so going back to the sliding PS, I'm a little afraid of her too because I did an episode on the Hilton sisters and I was like, "Oh god, I'm so scared now. Should I delete
Yeah.
it?" But but I think that one thing from the reunion last year that struck me about, the sliding doors moment is I think that Kyle just had it with like you can tell she can't do anything right when it comes to Kathy. She cannot do anything right. Kathy is always mad at her for little things. And like, I get the picture that when Kathy's mad, it's scary.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is like she
Kyle.
Yes, she uses a voice and it's more here's the thing, there's a look in her eye. There was one scene in with between Paris and her mom when they were talking about the baby and Kathy looked at Paris and I was like, "Holy crap. That look is enough to like send me
Or
screaming."
or that scene with Kathy talking to Paris about the ghostwriter of her book. She's like,
Yes.
that's not you. That's not you. That's the ghostwriter. I need to talk to her. I need to talk to
Yeah.
the ghostwriter. And you can tell why Paris hid the baby. And you can tell why Paris didn't tell her about what's in the book because she would have prevented all of it. And in saying all of this, I also want to say Kathy Hilton is one of my favorite people to watch on reality television.
Mhm.
So we do have to kind of normalize that just because somebody is potentially dangerous or exhibiting bad behavior doesn't mean they're not fascinating to watch because they are. Somebody showing warts and all is so fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, I think Kathy can be a delight. I think she
Yeah.
is sweet and I think she loves her kids and I think she's beautifully kooky,
Funny. Yeah.
funny, just like I think she has a lot of great qualities, but unfortunately, I think she tries so hard to control the narrative, which Paris essentially has said. She wanted the facade to look perfect and it's just like Kyle and Paris, and they're done with that. They're like, we don't want to live this life anymore where we're just pretending to be perfect, pretending to be something that we're not. And I think that last reunion was totally a moment for Kyle where she was like, I can continue to do the thing I've always done and be a good wife and a good mother and keep my mouth shut. And she's like, I just can't do it
Yeah.
anymore. And I
What's the
respect
point?
her. Yeah, what's the
I mean,
point?
I do too. That's why I think Kyle, if she was able to be completely honest, would be one of the most fascinating sit down interviews. Like, I mean, like that is, and I'll never get this interview, but that is one of my number one interviews to be able to talk to her about this, because I just find her so fascinating, because a lot of people don't have the bravery to actually pull stakes up on their life. And like, what are we complaining about? That she's not drinking anymore? Well, that's a pretty damn good thing. What are we complaining about? That she works out too hard? What
I
are
know.
we complaining about? And also the Morgan Wade of it all. I don't really know, nor do I care. And I understand that's my privilege to not care, because I grew up with a lot of people in all sorts of relationships. But what is your take on that Morgan Wade relationship? Because Kyle, I always joke about it on the show, I don't know if it's a romance, but it does seem a little bit of high school. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. They just love. I mean, it's giddy. It's that giddy feeling when you first love somebody. Not saying it's romantic, but it's that giddy. I've had that with friends where I just love them. I want to be around them nonstop. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so my take on this is that I think Kyle is attracted to Morgan as a human because of a couple things. Morgan is a gal who clearly, can I curse? Is that okay?
Fuck yeah, yeah.
She gives zero fucks, like truly. Morgan Wade gives zero fucks.
I give zero fucks, Kyle. It's
I know,
me,
she's the
Morgan
weirdest
Wade.
voice.
Yeah,
Like, it's not
it's like a
what I expected.
frog Forrest Gump. Like I
Yeah.
I love it so much, though. I love her voice.
I do too. It's just not what I expected. But I think that for Kyle, Morgan represents freedom. Freedom to be whoever the hell Morgan is, who she is. And she's happy and she's proud and she's, just who she is. And I think Kyle admires that. And number two, the huge thing that connects them that I think most people miss is that Morgan Wade tested positive for the BRCA breast cancer genes.
For breast cancer, yeah.
That's right. And she had a double mastectomy. They call it being a previvor in the cancer community. So she had a double mastectomy as a result, and Kyle's mother passed away from breast cancer. And so I think that Kyle, she is fascinated by this person for all of those reasons. I think she admires Morgan's bravery, but I do agree with you that there does seem to be kind of this like lovey, flirtatious thing. For me, and I'm going to be honest, what I've said on my Instagram page about this is I feel the people who are just intent on talking about her being a lesbian, I think it's fetishizing queer culture, and I don't like it. We don't know. For us to decide someone's sexual orientation is just not appropriate. I'm a huge ally, and I'm just never going to be okay with that. And it doesn't matter. Who cares? If they are together romantically, great. I hope they're happy. And if they're not, then, personally, I don't think they are. I think Kyle just found someone who doesn't want anything from Kyle. I think Morgan is the first person in Kyle's life that doesn't want anything from her. And Kyle ended up doing this documentary on Morgan Wade. And I think, in fact, Kyle kind of wanted something from Morgan. So,
well, I mean, but do you think that is Morgan not wanting anything from Kyle? Do you think there's an element of Kyle then trying to give as much to Morgan as possible? Because,
yeah.
I mean, I've seen her wearing the Rolex that Mauricio gave her. I've seen Morgan wearing that. We know that she's taken Morgan on all these trips. She's doing the documentary. She got her an article in the LA Times. Kyle is really pushing her weight onto Morgan and her talent, which I know she is a believer in her talent, but it is interesting how much Kyle is giving to this person. Yeah, I mean, she even made it onto Kathy's grid on Instagram. Kathy did a picture with Morgan over the holidays, which I just thought was another fascinating element to this. But what do you think that means of somebody like, well, I don't want anything. Well, I'm going to keep giving you stuff.
Yeah, I do find that interesting. I think Kyle is a work in progress, and I think that Kyle is so used to giving more than taking care of herself. Like, she's just a natural caretaker. So I think that all of the stuff she's doing for Morgan is because she legitimately wants to help her, but it does feel a little codependent. I think Kyle, especially because of the situation with Kim's alcoholism and things like that, Kyle has definitely a lot of codependency that I do notice in a lot of her relationships, right? Because normally when we make a new friend and we're excited about it, as adults, she's kind of acting like a teenager with Morgan. And so I think that tells me that maybe there's a little bit of codependency there. And Kyle needs to do a little bit more self-focus, but listen, we're all works in progress. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I just am so curious where it's going to go. And I'm curious to see where it's going to go on the show, because like we always talk about, it's what the show is trying to present us, what the producers want us to see, but then there's a reality behind the reality. And I'm very curious because I saw an interview with Kyle where she had said, listen, I knew I was going through these issues with Mauricio when we were going into the season, and I don't have a good poker face, so I didn't know how I was going to handle this. So they knew all of these scenes with her and Mauricio where he's like, love being your tattoos, love be like, they already knew they were separating. They already knew this was already fully in progress. And I find it also just interesting of these reality shows. Sometimes we don't want or get to see the deeper meaning because we do surface level shit like focus on the jewelry, focus because it's fun. It's more fun to talk about Sutton buying a horse online, buying Santos. Like, that's so silly. It's more fun to talk about wearing pardon my language, like dick riding pants to Magic Mike in Vegas. Like, I wore my pants. Like, that's so funny. That's something that you can talk about with human behavior. But when it gets to Kyle and that conversation, it threw it in another realm for me. And I sometimes wonder, and do you wonder if these shows have enough of a foundation that it can really hold these serious conversations?
That is such a good question, because I ask myself that all the time, because I'm like, am I just like aging out of Housewives, or am I just finding it more vapid than I used to 10 years ago? We're in an interesting age of Housewives where it's like, I think there's two camps. I think there's the camp of people who like their housewives sick and messy. And then there's a camp of people who have been watching since the beginning and are now a little bit older and are like, let's take something of substance, So it'll be interesting to me to see where this all goes, because personally, and I don't know if this is just because I'm a therapist, I like, obviously, the more substantive presentation. I don't care. I don't want to see another softball game in Jersey. Like, I'm done with these, arguments over the same stuff from like 10 years ago. It's like, can we move on? So it's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it.
Well, Jersey, I mean, I love that you brought that up with the softball games. It's like, I keep thinking about Sisyphus lately, and with Jersey, it's every year it's pushing the same boulder. Joey Gorga and Teresa Giudice pushing that boulder up the hill, knowing that it's going to fall down by the end of the season. And how many times are we going to do this into perpetuity? Are we in some kind of like lost, like, before we reach heaven, we're in that what do they call it?
Purgatory.
Well, are we in purgatory with Jersey? Like, we're never going to escape this relationship. And you talked about in an episode is that I think this was in regards to Monica and her mom, is that, you do have to set up boundaries for yourself. And in certain situations, if your boundaries aren't respected, you have to pull yourself out of it. And I sometimes go, guys, we're not getting out of this situation. This relationship is never going to be fixed, and it's not going to be fixed on camera. And I'm glad it's getting good ratings, and that means it's going to keep going. But at the same time, let's move on, because we're not like Teresa's. You made this brilliant observation about Teresa. You said I wrote this down because I thought it was great. Let me find it real quick. Sorry, guys. She said, Teresa keeps people around her who are echo chambers. Teresa Giudice, and I thought that was so right, because she wants to live in, I just love, love, love. I just love, love, love. She wants to have people around her saying, you're right, this is positive. And if you live in an echo chamber, you're never going to fully grow or heal in the way that potentially, I mean, wouldn't you love to see Teresa turn into Kyle Richards in some? Could you imagine? Could you imagine Teresa wakes up and goes, like, just Teresa just totally goes on a different path?
I would love that. That'd be the greatest joy of my life. Because here's the thing, I think Teresa can be a sweetheart. I think she
Yes. No,
is
yes.
such a sweetheart. She loves her daughters. Oh, I just,
Such a good mom.
such a good mom. But I think that she and a lot of people, a lot of these housewives in particular, they want to be surrounded by echo chambers who are just telling them, you're amazing, keep doing what you're doing. And to me, that is the quickest way to a very shallow, unhappy life. We need people around us who are going to tell us, listen, you're out of pocket. What's happening with you? Like, call me on stuff. To me, that's true intimacy. Cause that's the other thing. It's like, if you're surrounded by echo chambers, there's a real lack of intimacy to that. If you can't tell someone, hey, I think you're making a misstep here, or I'm concerned about Louis, or, whatever it is, we have to have those people in our lives to keep us in check. And you can tell a lot of these housewives just don't.
Oh, I mean, I have a couple people in my, Maritza, who works on the show. She's great. Like, she'll tell me like hard truths that I'm like, oh my God, in the moment. But it's like so good to actually hear those things, because, I don't want to hear that I'm great. I'm not great. I don't want to hear that doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't make you strive to be better or to look at yourself in any kind of deeper way. Okay. So just to put a cap, by the way, are you having a good time? I love this so much.
Is this okay?
Good. This is going so good.
Yes.
So Beverly Hills, I'm so excited to see where the season ends. And also I'm so excited to already see a new season and what we're going to see. The only thing I find interesting still about Kyle, though, is I got a TikTok video sent to me, and it was some lady on the street stopping Kyle and having her break down everything that she was wearing. Kyle still is a very, in terms of possessions, she was like, oh, this is a Gucci bag, this is this jewelry, this is this hat. And it was like she must have been wearing, no joke, about $100,000 worth of clothing just on a street in New York. This wasn't like to go to an event. This was just, and I thought that's interesting too, because even when we're healing ourselves, we still have that one thing that we allow ourselves. We still have that one thing, and then that thing actually becomes the issue. And I don't, like, in your opinion, and for all the people listening, what does real healing look like? What is real? I mean, because I feel like I think this month and this year I've kind of been defeated in a lot of ways where I'm like, what's the point? Like, and I don't mean I know what's the point of but like, what's the point? Like, what is the point? Like, I'm not going to fix. How can I fix myself at this point? How are we supposed to look at life?
That is such a good question. And it's honestly one I've asked myself too, because, for those of you listening, my listeners know, yours don't, but I have an insane trauma history. Insane. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I've had a lifetime of trauma before that. And I think that what healing looks like is so different for everybody, but it feels like home. You'll know that you're healing when you are at home with yourself. And so for me, what that means is that I do think Kyle, one of the things that she, like you said, even when we're healing, we all have that one thing. And I think her one thing is kind of like, I'm not going to call it a shopping addiction because I don't know that, but it seems like she over focuses on material goods. I'm always looking with the housewives. If they're draping themselves in material goods, it makes me wonder if they don't feel valuable inside. Because for me, I dress, unhoused chic is my look.
I drape myself in Old Navy. I mean, I'm a huge Old Navy proponent.
Yeah. So, you're never going to see me, even if I had the money, which I don't, but I think that there's a part of her that, imagine how it must feel to make yourself vulnerable. The whole world is talking about you, criticizing you, and not empathizing. And so I wonder if it's her armor. I think a lot of these housewives use their labels as armor to make them feel special. Like when Monica talked about getting the bag and Lisa Barlow talks about all her stuff. Yeah. So I think that there's still some work to be done there, especially for Kyle. Listen, I if I had the money, I'd be a shopper too. I love a handbag. I would absolutely, like, if I got to make a wish as an adult, it would be to go in Kyle's closet and just look around. But I think
I thought you were about to say go in Kyle's closet and steal everything like that guy did with all her purses that a couple years ago.
No.
I was like, Melissa, please, no. No,
No.
by the way, and I wasn't diagnosing Kyle at all either. It was just a video that I saw that I found
Sure.
interesting that she just did in the past couple of weeks. And I said, well, that's really interesting still to me. But, the privilege that we have of not being on television is that people aren't necessarily looking into our lives with that kind of microscope. I mean,
Sure.
but
Sure.
sometimes that's not true. But like I think that is something that I find interesting is that we have the privilege of not being on television, even though most people do want to be on television. Hey, has Kyle reached out to you personally?
She hasn't, and I wish she would have, because I made a joke on one of my podcasts that she blew up my life, because it literally blew up my life. I went viral. Everyone was talking about
It's
me.
really scary. Yeah.
It was so scary. And honestly, by the way, I'm going to be vulnerable and be honest for a minute. It brought up some of my own trauma where it felt like everyone was talking about me, but no one was talking to me. And that
Oh,
really,
that's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
because when I was 17, when I was in high school, I had ovarian cancer and I was the cancer kid, right? And so everyone was talking about me, but no one was talking to me. And it brought up some of those really tough emotions, which was a growing edge for me that I'm super grateful I had the opportunity to look at and be able to, work through that. But I think you're right in that, for me, I have not a lot of eyes on my stuff. You definitely have more and Kyle has a ton. So I do think there is a privilege for me still having anonymity that she just doesn't get to have. So I just think that's, why we always have to lead with kindness and empathy, because truly we really never know what someone's dealing with from moment to moment. Like, I know what Kyle's dealing with now because she confirmed it, but at the same time, it's like, what must that be like for her day to day? I
And
can only imagine.
also, we as people sometimes don't even recognize what we're going through. We're going through
Hmm.
it, but we don't have the verbiage to put behind it. We don't necessarily. It's fumbling around in the dark without your glasses on, just bumping into everything, going, "I just don't feel well. I don't feel good. I don't know why." And then when you start talking
Hmm.
to somebody, you're like, "Well, this is why. This is potentially why. This is another reason." You're like, "Oh, sometimes when
Right.
I'm at my worst, if I talk into a microphone, it actually gets those dark thoughts out of my head." And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, thank God. Because it's not something that's just like, oh, I should talk about this. But when I do, I feel better. That's why I'm a big proponent
Hmm.
of therapy, but it is really scary. Okay,
Hmm.
listen, I want to keep going. We have about 20 minutes. And God, I wish I could talk to you for hours and hours. Hopefully you'll come back on because this is just already, I'm not going to get to everything I want
I
to.
know, Ryan, you and I were such chatterboxes. I swear we could do a 4-hour episode.
Oh,
So don't worry.
but it's good to feel excited. Like I'm really excited
Hmm.
talking to you, and I think that's what it reminds me. And I'll do a lot of solo episodes, and they're okay. But I love when I talk with somebody that I'm like, oh, what about this? And they have
Yeah.
it's like a great game of tennis.
Sure.
Which
Sure.
I don't watch, so I don't know if that actually is tennis or not, you guys. Okay, so. I wanted to talk about Southern Charm in Salt Lake City. Let's go to Salt Lake City first, if
Okay.
we can get both of these in. You had a great couple of episodes. The one I was just listening to again was about Monica and her Vovo, her mom.
Hmm.
And this has trauma and this has so much written all over it on its face, even without, I mean, just like anybody could see this. Well, right, like, but you were
Hmm.
digging even in deeper. And even you were talking about the one episode with Monica and her mom where they were at dinner. And I always think that's a funny episode just because they bring out guacamole and Monica's mom is like, ooh, is this dessert? And it's like, no, it's guacamole, you dork. Like, what do you, that's already a big red flag for me. But you made this really interesting observation that I didn't even put. It's very small, but she was looking for aspirin. She wanted aspirin. And can you
Hmm.
explain what you said about this of the mom looking for aspirin at that dinner?
Yeah, so I'm really good with this stuff. Like, if someone says something super little, it can be like the biggest thing for my brain. That's just how my brain works. I think she was asking for aspirin because she was in psychic pain. She was in emotional pain. So not only was it a distraction technique, clearly a distraction technique, but it was also, you're hurting me. I'm hurting. I need something to take care of this emotional pain that neither of them wanted to really talk about.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really fascinating. And you also talk about in that episode, you talk about Monica being a cycle breaker. A
Hmm.
cycle breaker because she comes from, and I mean, nobody can argue, even in the little information that we've had this season, of, you use the example of Monica having to hide, like be in a trunk so her mom can make out with a guy.
Mm.
We know that Monica's mom left for New York, left her with friends or family.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things where you're like, oh my God. I mean, it really is intense.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Monica is a cycle breaker? Because the only thing I would push back on is, we're about to hit the season finale this next week, and supposedly something really intense gets revealed about Monica.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially, Monica has, I think she's an onion. And I want her to stay on it because I just think she is so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But can you be a cycle breaker and still have insanely bad behavior yourself?
Yes. Yes. Short answer is
Talk
yes.
to you later. Okay, good. Okay, good episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and here's why, because that is a super good point, because Monica clearly has a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. Her behavior is atrocious at times, and I do think that's what we're going to see. What it means to be a cycle breaker is just to be able to acknowledge the family trauma. I talk a lot about generational trauma in my podcast, which is just essentially how trauma gets passed down from our ancestors. And there's literally proof in our DNA. It's called epigenetics.
Yeah, I wrote that word down. Yeah, epigenetics.
Yeah, so the epigenetics proves that we are sincerely still with our ancestors' trauma. It goes down from generation to generation, and each generation it dilutes a little bit until there's a generation of what I call a cycle breaker, of who starts to become aware and notice all these patterns. Where Monica, it falls flat, and I think her daughter may take over this, because from what I watch, I do think Monica's daughter is parentified. And what I mean by that, parentification is when parents use their kids. Danielle Staub is a really good example of this. How about that flashback?
Yeah.
When adult women and men can do this too, use their children for emotional support because they don't have it anywhere else, that parentifies the child. So then the child becomes codependent and feels that they're responsible for the mother. So, or the father. So I feel that Monica's daughter is the trauma baton, I believe, is being passed to her, and she's going to have to learn how to take, like Monica started it, and it's like a relay each generation, if that makes sense. That's how how I visualize it. Yeah.
That does make sense. I'm just so curious what's about to come out with Monica, because I feel like even if she has this handle on the epigenetics of it all, she realizes, even in that scene you pointed out at dinner, she had said she was doing everything right in terms of, not, and also one of the things is to not spread your pain, which the mom wants everybody, to feel her pain.
Right.
And you also make this great point of Monica's mom needs Monica to attend to her needs, but she's not willing to attend to Monica's needs.
That's right. That's right. And that is parentification, essentially, where I think Monica does a better job of attending to her child's needs. But that is what is so blatantly gross to me with Monica's mother, who I do believe that there's some narcissistic streaks there, that she just like wants her child to be what she needs without any awareness that she's not willing to meet any of Monica's needs. And in fact, the only thing she's willing to do for Monica is like punish her. I think some parents, especially of an older generation, like my parents are boomers. And so, that comes with a lot.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes a generation feels, well, I'm your parent, so you need to just do for me, but I'm going to ignore all your stuff. And it's like, well, that is not how this works, my friend.
Oh man, it's interesting dealing with my dad now, because mom did everything, and my dad does. I mean, it really is being around him. It's like he just doesn't, and this is not an offense to him, he doesn't know how to do the basic things.
Sure.
So like, it's like what I imagine, and I could be completely wrong. It's a little bit like parenting. Like I'm having to walk him through certain things, or his car battery died. He's like, "Oh, I'll fix it." I'm like, "No, let's fix it now." What do? We call AAA, and And by the way, I want to point out, I would not do this for myself. I would let it go and all that. But I'm like, I hear my mom's voice. I find that so interesting, those kind of relationships. If you are in this relationship, and how we relate to other people and how we let them do for us, and we get used to that, and we don't know how to do for ourselves. I sometimes with Monica, I think it's so real, and there's so much left to uncover that it's another person where I'm like, almost like Shannon Bedore this next season of OC. I'm like, should we have done this? Is this good? Because also you're talking about your Vovo in front of your kids so openly of like, you know how Vovo lies about me and does all of this, and you're like,
Yeah.
holy. And Monica, you could just do a whole series on Monica alone because of,
Mhm.
we know she cheated in her marriage with somebody in her
Oh.
family. There's so much to uncover, but
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you can do good in one thing about potentially setting boundaries with your mom, but you
Mhm.
can still be doing a lot of other things that are potentially wrong. And how do we pick ourselves up from that? And how do we
Right.
expect empathy when we're on reality television?
Yeah, and it reminds me too of a saying, which is that healing isn't linear. So healing kind of, it's like a roller coaster. And, we can have some of the components and still have some problematic issues that are creating problems in our behaviors. And that we have to continue to look at. Like, there's no, you're healed and then you're done. For me, I worked through a ton of my trauma. It was the hardest thing I ever did. It was years of hell and pain. But once I got to the other side, it's not like, oh, good, I'm done. I still have to be continually aware of how things are impacting me. And I think that as humans, that's scary. And a lot of folks, we just don't want to do it. And listen, I'm guilty of that sometimes. So I hope this is super validating
Yeah.
to you and also to other people, is that I'm a therapist and I get stuck in
No,
shit all
no,
the time.
Melissa, it depresses the hell out of me that you get stuck in shit all the time. I want somebody to have, I mean, that was my whole thing with Sandoval. That was my whole thing, was like, I know my faults. I thought Sandoval was better than all of us. Like, that was my
Mm,
idiot thinking, was that like, I know my faults as a dude. I know I know all of that, but I thought he was and I know this is insane. I know people have like literally said you're insane, but I thought he was just the one. I thought he was, man, if I could, I don't know, that was, but
no,
I love
that's
all of this. So
disappointing. I'm
well,
sorry. Seriously, that
no, no,
sucks.
no, no, it is also is ridiculous. The further you get away from Scandival, you realize, okay, thank God air is getting pressurized again. Finally, just to finish up here, and this is not going to be enough time, but I just wanted to talk about Southern Charm. We
Mhm.
talked about it briefly in regards to Austin having therapy on camera, but I also wanted to talk about the amount of deaths that have caused a lot of this behavior. You had pointed out Austin, of course, lost his sister when he was younger, and that gets brought up. And I think that's so good to bring up.
Mhm.
But also this year, Olivia and Taylor. Olivia
Mhm.
dealt with her brother's death on camera, and we know that Taylor is going to have to deal with the same thing. We'll probably see this more at the reunion because it will not happen on camera since the season finale is this week. Um,
Mhm.
I am, but at the same time, the show really is about shithead men. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
even though this is real stuff is happening, these are real
Mhm.
things. Olivia and Taylor are at each other's throat, and Taylor doesn't seem to get that relationships take time, healing takes time, forgiveness
Right.
takes time, and she wants it now, 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 which I believe is behavior she potentially learned from Shep. How do you view
Mhm.
Southern Charm this season?
So Southern Charm this season has been wild for me. It's just been a clinical goldmine of just like, I cannot look away. So between, the grief bonding, between Austin and Olivia, between, here, I'm going to say something. I was going to post about this, but I haven't gotten a chance to yet. I think, how everyone was looking at Taylor and Shep, like, Shep is just this incredibly self-focused, just lacks a lot of
Yeah.
those, healthy adult mature skills. And we all wondered why Taylor, or how that worked. Well, now we know, because I think there's some of that in Taylor too. So
Yeah.
people, and here's the thing about women, this is what I'm going to say: women are really good at hiding their pathology, especially when you're cute. If you're cute and you put on a good facade, you put on a good face, it takes a while to kind of see those darker pieces. And when I heard Taylor talk on the balcony or whatever she was on,
With her
about how
brother,
she
yeah.
has no regrets, I was like, oh, so this is how you were with Shep for so long. This, now it completely makes sense to me. So that's kind of my view on that. And I think that Olivia, this would have been a good season for Taylor's well-being to sit it out, but it would have, we wouldn't have had all the drama that we had. But I think for her, like sometimes what's good for TV and what's good for a human being are polar opposite,
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tough thing, that's what this comes down to, is that dichotomy.
Well, it's interesting because you have these really deep things happening. And then on the other, like, I still actually am getting enjoyment out of watching, like we had in the past week's episode, Craig and Paige having dinner with Madison and her husband. And, Craig wants this relationship so badly, so much so that in a scene last week's episode, he was like, listen, I'm such in a good place right now. Even if I lose you, I'm going to be okay, which is such a funny, like, we don't need to talk about it. I know you're not prepared to talk about it. We don't have to talk about it for another year, but I just want to let you know, if, this doesn't work out, I'm still so emotionally good right now and strong. And I thought, what a funny thing to say and what a funny piece of behavior. It's almost of like, it's a way to talk about it without talking about it, but it's also a way to be like, I'm amazing. And like, we know Craig would be a mess. If Paige was like, okay, we're done, Craig would be like, no, it would be all over. But it's this guy like trying to, get some authority in his life and say, I'm good. And I'm proud of him. But it also is almost like a bluff in a way of like, I'm going to be good no matter what.
Well, you know what? Going back to your question about how do we know if we're healing, I think there's a part of Craig that really does believe that he has got, because who would have ever thought in 1 trillion years that Craig would be the emotionally healthiest male on that show?
Who would think that Madison would potentially be the most emotionally healthy female?
I know. It is like the upside down. It is so wild. But I do think, to back to your point, is that he means I have healed and worked on my stuff, that I would be devastated because I love you, but I wouldn't like get blackout drunk, fall apart, lose my shit completely. That's what I think that he meant. And honestly, when he said that in Paige's face, I was like, maybe she needed to hear that.
Oh yeah. And by the way, Paige was like, zoinks. Paige was like what? She was eating this tuna salad sandwich that he made for her, just being Paige. And I mean, by the way, and also you're right. I do believe that there is a part of Craig that does believe that entirely. I do also think the reality of human situations, though, is what you think you're going to feel and how you actually feel usually are very opposite. So my thing was like, I was like, yeah, okay, buddy, let's see if that actually is true. But I do think they are going to make it, or whatever make it means. Like, I do think they will get to the altar. I think it's a more realistic relationship that we see on reality television as opposed to the cheating ones, the ones that are like, like Austin is like, oh, Olivia's the one. I don't, but anytime Olivia like says something to Austin, he's like, oh, shut up. Like, he doesn't want to hear anything she has to say.
Well, because, as I said, Austin is, I think he self-sabotages all his relationships because he's afraid to lose, because he lost his sister. I think he's afraid to lose a significant other, and I think he's afraid to have a child and lose that child. I think he has so much trauma. So that's that. He at least has a reason for being douchey. Shep, I don't really think has a reason. But one thing
Shep, I always think about like, where does he go from here? Like, obviously he is the guy that you want to have a beer with. He probably would be so entertaining for a night. You would have the time of your life, but over a long-term life, where do you go here from there? And also, to your Austin point, I didn't really think about it in that way, because part of how I think about it is Austin is getting things just given to him. He's getting females given to him. Anybody, even if they think Austin is a douche, there's still a good chance that women would still sleep with him that are aware of his behavior. So when you're given all of this, also, I think that is another roadblock for any kind of long-term relationship.
Yeah, I just think they haven't really gotten enough consequences. Because you would think by watching them that they should have had the consequences to, change their behavior. But I've seen people have the most wild consequences and it not change their behavior at all. So it's just, it clearly wasn't enough for them to make a change. But I think, like, going back to Craig and Paige, it's just, there's a message I like to give people too, that sometimes love isn't enough. Like, we can love someone deeply in a relationship, and sometimes that is just not enough to sustain a long-term relationship. It needs so much more than that. And so
that's hard. You don't understand that when you're younger. I think that only comes with age, unfortunately.
Yes, I tell my niece is 17. I tell her that all the time. I say, don't get caught up in
Oh,
relationships because until you meet the person that you're going to marry, all your relationships are going to end and they can all be beautiful and you can get lessons and all these things. But yeah,
but
that's
your heart, when your heart feels it for the first time, your heart never felt something like that before. So it
right.
takes you on this roller coaster, and it's so chemical, and it's so and you're
Mm-hmm.
not used to that, and only through years or potentially decades do you realize it's like a muscle, like anything
Yeah.
else, which is kind of good and bad and sad at the same time.
Hmm.
Melissa, I wish I could talk to you for another hour, but I got to go change some of my own behavior in therapy
Yeah.
right now. And but I just had the most fabulous. I knew I was, but I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you right now. What a great way to end my year. But I want to let you guys know. Listen, this is the real deal. Listen to her show, Your BISH, BISH Therapist. It is truly, truly incredible, and it's going to make you think some thoughts. It's going to, I really think you are going to get such a something from this that I really put the highest stamp of approval on it. And I really hope
Oh,
I get to talk to you again, because this was just so easy, and I so fun.
yeah. Yeah, so easy. I feel like we've known each other for years. So I just thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much for your kindness. I am so grateful, and I would love to come back. I'd also love to have you on my show
Oh,
when I come
anytime,
back. Yeah.
anytime. And you guys out there listening, I hope you are doing okay. And just another, suggestion: put one foot in front of the other, and maybe put that foot towards going into therapy and looking at some
Hmm.
of your own behavior, even though it is the hardest possible thing for you to do. And it's going to feel potentially worse before it feels better, but just get through each day, try to get through each day, and then watch these shows to laugh, and then maybe have a deeper understanding of yourself. So, your Bish therapist, Melissa Reich. Melissa, I'm screwing up your name again.
It's
Oh my
okay.
God.
Melissa Reich, no worry. You're a Bish
Oh my
therapist. It doesn't
God.
matter. It's okay, Ryan.
Goodbye.